first thing to return was the smell. A sterile chemical bite that scoured the sinuses and tasted like bleach on the back of the tongue. It was the universal scent of institutional healing, the cheap kind, where the antiseptic was meant to cover the lingering odor of decay rather than eliminate it. It smelled of poverty and desperation, the same smell that clung to the lower-level medbays from Earth to the Kuiper Belt. Sound came next, a low, uneven hum that vibrated up through the thin mattress and into the bones of his skull. A failing power conduit, or maybe a life support recycler on its last legs. The hum was punctuated by a rhythmic wet cough from somewhere nearby, a sound so ragged it seemed to tear at the air itself. Kaelen Voss forced his eyes open. The light was a dull, phosphorus gray emitted from long strips in the ceiling that flickered with nauseating inconsistency. He was on a narrow cot, the sheet a coarse synth fabric that scraped against his skin. A thin tube was taped to the back of his hand, feeding a clear nutrient saline solution into a bruised vein. He cataloged the pain, an old, familiar ritual. A deep, throbbing ache resided in his chest, a testament to the brutal pressure differential he'd endured. Each breath was a shallow, careful thing, feeling as though his ribs were wrapped in barbed wire. His head felt heavy, a swollen melon filled with grinding sand and a sharp, metallic taste coated his mouth. Blood, he remembered. The memory wasn't a narrative. It was a sensory explosion. The high-frequency shriek of stressed metal, a sound that bypassed the ears and went straight to the spine. The gut-wrenching lurch as the sea serpent's cockpit imploded. The instantaneous, violent fog of vaporized coolant that had flash-boiled in the sudden vacuum, scalding his lungs. The final, damning image of his console sparking into darkness, the salvage claw telemetry winking out, taking with it a small fortune in pre-Hegemony alloys and his last chance at solvency. He had managed to hit the emergency ballast release, a pure, reptilian instinct that had sent his detached cockpit screaming toward the surface. A tiny bubble of life escaping a tomb of his own making. A tomb he now owed the Hegemony for. The thought was a cold stone in his gut. The sea serpent was gone. His rig, his life, his only means of staying afloat in the relentless current of the contribution cycle. He wasn't just broke. He was catastrophically in debt. The submersible was leased from a Hegemony-controlled consortium. The salvage contract had clauses for failure, penalties for environmental contamination from the wreck, and a rescue fee that was surely astronomical. They would calculate it all down to the last credit, add interest, and then they would come for him. A med tech, a tired-looking woman with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that held the flat, glassy look of someone who had seen too much misery to care about any single instance of it, moved to his bedside. She didn't speak, her movements efficient and devoid of warmth. She checked the drip, her fingers palpating the vein around the IV needle with a practiced roughness. "Vitals are stable," she muttered. more to the datapad in her other hand than to him. Concussion, minor barotrauma to the lungs, severe contusions. You're lucky the cockpit held at all. Kael tried to speak, but his throat was a desert. All that came out was a dry rasp. He swallowed, the motion sending a fresh spike of pain through his ribs. Water. He managed. She picked up a plastic bowl from the bedside table and squeezed a small stream of lukewarm, recycled water into his mouth. It tasted faintly of ozone and metal. Don't talk. You've got at least 2 cracked ribs. He didn't care about the ribs. He only cared about the numbers. My account. What's the damage? The tech's eyes flickered from her datapad to his face, and for a second, a sliver of something that might have been pity softened their hard edges. It was gone as quickly as it appeared. That's not my department. Fiscal will be in touch. She made a final notation on her pad, the stylus clicking with sharp finality, and moved on to the next cot, to the man with the wet, tearing cough. Fiscal will be in touch. It was a death sentence, delivered with the emotional weight of a weather report. He lay back, the worn pillow crackling under the weight of his head. He closed his eyes, but the flickering gray light of the medbay was burned onto the inside of his lids. He saw the numbers scrolling behind his eyes, a cascade of red figures plunging him into a darkness deeper than any abyss he'd ever salvaged. The contribution cycle was a lie. He'd always known it, but he'd played the game anyway. He'd worked the crushing depths, breathing recycled air and eating nutrient paste, chasing the phantom promise that enough work, enough contribution would earn him a life of dignity. A ticket to Mars, maybe. Clean air. Real food. A sky that wasn't a perpetual smear of smog and light pollution. It was all a beautifully crafted trap. A system designed to keep the masses running on a treadmill, always reaching for a prize that was perpetually moved just out of reach. And for those who fell off, for those who broke a leg or lost their rig, there was no safety net. There was only the fall. He had seen it happen to others. Friends, colleagues. One day they were there, complaining about quotas and the price of oxygen, and the next they were gone. Their HAB units sealed, their names purged from the public comms. They had been uncycled. And now it was his turn. The wall-mounted terminal at the foot of his cot chimed, a soft, pleasant tone that was grotesquely at odds with the grim reality of the ward. It flickered to life, the blue and gold sigil of the Terrene Hegemony resolving on the screen. He knew what this was. Fiscal was in touch. A synthesized voice, calibrated for maximum calm and authority, filled the small space around his bed. Citizen Kaelen Voss, Registry 7, Gamma, -9, -2, Delta. This is an automated message from the Hegemony Office of Fiscal Reconciliation. Please attend. He pushed himself up, hissing as his ribs protested. The screen shifted, displaying his file. His face, a grim, scowling image from his last ID renewal, stared back at him. Beside it, columns of figures began to populate the screen. Per contract 44, Omega -7, the voice continued. The loss of Hegemony asset, submersible designation Sea Serpent, has resulted in a liability of 1.2 million standard credits. The number just hung there. It was more than he could earn in 10 lifetimes. Penalty for failure to complete salvage contract 89, Alpha -3, 350,000 standard credits. Fee for environmental cleanup of hydrocarbon and coolant leakage, 180,000 standard credits. Fee for deep range emergency rescue and retrieval services, 500,000 standard credits. Costs for medical treatment, stabilization, and 2 cycles of ward residency, 45,780 standard credits. The numbers stacked, one on top of the other, a tower of debt, so high it blotted out the sky. Total outstanding liability, the voice stated with chilling placidity, is 2,275,780 standard credits. Your current account balance is 1,134 credits. This constitutes a catastrophic debt default. Kael stared at the screen, a bitter, humorless laugh trying to fight its way out of his raw throat. Catastrophic. They had a word for everything. A neat, sterile box to put a man's ruined life into. As per the Hegemony Charter, Article 11, Section 4, a citizen in catastrophic default, unable to meet their obligations to the contribution cycle, forfeits all standard rights and privileges. Kaelen Voss, your citizenship is hereby suspended. Your status is now designated uncycle. The word appeared on the screen in stark, blocky red letters. Uncycle. It replaced his registry number. It replaced his face. It was all he was now. A non-person. A resource to be disposed of. The terminal listed the practical consequences. A systematic dismantling of his existence. His HAB unit access was terminated. His comm link was deactivated. His ration account was frozen. His very name was flagged in the system as property of the state. The life he had known, meager as it was, had just been digitally guillotined. The synthesized voice offered a final, hollow platitude. The Hegemony thanks you for your past contributions. A reconciliation officer will be with you shortly to discuss your asset disposal options. Have a productive day. The screen went dark. He lay there, the hum of the failing conduit the only sound. The weight on his chest was no longer just from the pressure trauma. It was the weight of a system that had just pronounced him dead while leaving his body alive to pay for the funeral. He thought of his dishonorable discharge. He'd been an officer once, a damn good one. In the Hegemony fleet, he'd believed in the mission, in bringing order to a chaotic solar system. Then he'd seen what that order really meant: the corner cutting, the corruption, the brutal subjugation of anyone who didn't toe the line. He'd refused an order that would have cost the lives of civilians caught in a crossfire. For that, they had stripped him of his rank, his career, his honor. They had thrown him out, but they had let him keep his citizenship. A small mercy he now understood was just a longer leash. They had let him run, let him struggle, and now that he had fallen, they were reeling him back in. Time lost its meaning. It could have been minutes or hours later when he heard them. The sound was unmistakable, a sound designed to inspire fear and compliance. The rhythmic, heavy tread of mag-plated boots on the grimy floor of the corridor. It grew louder, closer, a metronome counting down the final seconds of his freedom. The wet coughing from the nearby cot sputtered and fell silent. The entire ward seemed to hold its breath. The door to his small, curtained-off section hissed open. Two of them stood there, silhouetted against the dim hall light. Hegemony enforcers. They were monoliths of matte black composite armor, bulky and inhuman. Their helmets were featureless save for a single horizontal red optic slit that glowed with an unnerving, predatory light. They carried pulse rifles held in a low-ready position, their posture a study in brutal efficiency. The air they displaced smelled of ozone, sterilized air from their suit filters, and the faint, hot scent of weaponized electronics. They didn't speak. One of them took a position by the door while the other stepped forward, his heavy boots making no sound on the cheap linoleum. He was a mountain of quiet menace. His red optic swept over Kael, a clinical, dismissive assessment of the broken man on the cot. Kael felt his muscles tense, an old instinct screaming at him to fight or flee. But his body was a wreck, and there was nowhere to run. He just stared back at the faceless helmet, his own reflection a warped, tiny figure swimming in the polished black curve of the faceplate. Finally, the lead enforcer spoke. His voice wasn't human. It was a harsh, synthesized rasp, filtered through the helmet's external speaker. It was the voice of a machine that had been taught to imitate a man. Asset 7, Gamma -9, -2, Delta. Kaelen Voss. It wasn't a question. You are uncycle. You are now property of the Terrene Hegemony, to be disposed of in a manner that best serves the public good. The enforcer raised a gauntleted hand, and a small holoscreen flickered to life in the air between them. Two options appeared, written in the same cold, blocky text as his new designation. You are presented with two options for your asset liquidation. The synthesized voice droned on, devoid of any inflection. Option 1, penal servitude. You will be transported to the Titan methane processing colony. Your role will be atmospheric filtration and maintenance. Due to atmospheric corrosives and radiation exposure, the projected lifespan for this assignment is 4 standard years. 4 years. A death sentence by slow, cancerous decay in the freezing methane slush of Titan. Kael's gaze flickered to the second option, and a cold, familiar dread coiled in his stomach. He knew what it would be. Option 2, recycling. The enforcer seemed to pause, as if the machine simulating his voice was programmed to add dramatic weight to the word. Your file indicates prior service in the Hegemony fleet. Rank, Lieutenant. Specialization, Small Craft Command. Tactical operations. A valuable skill set. Should you choose this option, your debt will be indefinitely deferred. You will be reinstated into Hegemony service. Designation, Infantry Corps, Recycled Division. There it was, the other side of the coin. A short life of hard labor, or an indefinite one as cannon fodder. They weren't offering him a choice. They were repossessing an asset they believed they still owned. His training, his experience, his body, it all belonged to them. The dishonorable discharge had been a temporary release. This was the recall. Some wars are fought to be lost. His old instructor used to say. Kael finally understood. The war for his own life, his own freedom, he'd been losing it since the day he was born. The contribution cycle, the salvage contracts, it was all just a more elaborate form of indenture. His mind raced. Titan was a grave. A slow, anonymous death in the dark. The military was a different kind of grave. But one he understood. He knew its language, its rhythms, its brutal logic. It was a hell he had survived before. More than that, it was a chance. A minuscule, desperate sliver of a chance to be somewhere other than a processing plant, to hold a weapon instead of a wrench, to have some agency, however small, in his own demise. In the military, you could still act. You could make a choice, even if it was just which way you faced when you died. He looked from the holoscreen back to the impassive red slit of the enforcer's helmet. He saw the trap, laid bare and gleaming. They wanted his skills. They were drafting him, using his debt as the legal justification. And they were counting on him to choose the devil he knew. A cold calm settled over him, displacing the fear and the rage. It was the same clarity he'd felt in the seconds before the sea serpent imploded. The moment when all possibilities narrowed to one. He was a piece on their board again. A pawn, to be sure, but a pawn could still move. He took a slow, painful breath, the air scraping his damaged lungs. He met the glowing red gaze of the machine man and gave his answer, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that was stronger than he expected. Recycling.